Bright Tuty. Every student matters.
Hello everyone. Hope all of you are doing well. So coming to the second aspect of the basic concepts is talking about the social groups. So till now we have talked about the concept of society. We have talked about what are the characteristics of society. We have talked about what are the basis of classification of society, why and what is, how a society, the basic and the fundamental unit of sociology, why is its study important. Now here is talking about the second aspect of the group, the basic concepts, that is the social group. Now I have always kept on saying that human beings are social beings, and that is what they explain you here for at the first, that man is a social animal. We cannot live as an individual in the society. We cannot live in isolation in the society. We are dependent on the presence of others. We are dependent about, or our sustainability, our life is definitely dependent on the others as well. So they say that man needs others for its existence and growth. Because of his need for others, man's life is essentially a group life. So it is not an individual's life. It is not a life that someone is living in isolation. Therefore, sociology is also interested in the study of social groups, because society, because the individual survives in the aspect of the social groups, it is very important for us as a sociologist or for sociology to be interested in the study of the groups. Now talking here and understanding, first and foremost important is the meaning and the definition of the term social groups. What are social groups? Can any group be a social group, or do we have a special characteristic of a social group, is something that we will be understanding now. So like I said, the social group is used in different ways. Okay, basically it means the collection of people. Basically, a social group means a collection of people, but not all collection of people are the social groups. For example, a collection of people basis on the common characteristic is known as a category, and a collection of people in one particular place is called an aggregate and not a social group. For a social group to be there, for a social group, the major characteristic is the social interaction. So and this is because there is no social relationship in a category or an aggregate, and hence that is what does not make them a social group. Therefore, a social group is found when there are social relationships between the people forming a collection. The absence of social relationships between the people, the absence of social relationships between the people are very much evidently telling us that this is not a social group. Therefore, the definition of a social group is based on the existence of social relationship. If there is the existence of social relationship, you may call it a social group. If there is a non-existence or there is no existence of social relationship, you will not be calling it a social group. Now, McIver and Page again defines a social group is a collection of human beings who are brought into social relationships with one another. Again, emphasizing on the word social relationships. It is a collection of people, no doubt. Yes, it is a collection of people, but it becomes a social group when you are brought into the social relationships with one another. However, Horton and Hunt says that groups are aggregates of people who have consciousness of membership and of interaction. You are a group of people who are staying at one particular place, but you ought to have that consciousness of the memberships, or you ought to have the consciousness of being the member of that particular group and having the interaction with the members of that group, and hence you become a social group. Now, talking about the characteristics of a social group, it is very, very important for us to understand the characteristic of the social group. The first characteristic of the social group is that a social group is a collection of individuals. We have talked about it. It is a collection of individuals. It may be small, it may be large, but it has to have at least 2 members to become a social group. Secondly, it says that it has a pattern of interaction between the members. There is a pattern of interaction between the members. Without such interaction, there can be no group, and that is what we have talked about before as well. Without any social relationship, without any social interaction, there can be no group. In fact, social interaction distinguishes a group from other collections of individuals such as category and aggregate. This is again something that we have elaboratively talked about before. Now, talking about the third characteristic is a social group has an organized structure. This is because the pattern of social interaction is based on shared values, norms, and interests. Now, when you have such kind of shared values, norms, and interest of social interaction, that is when you have an organized structure of a social group. If there is no organized structure, a collection of individuals remains only a potential group, even if there is some interaction among the people. So even if there is some kind of interaction among the people, but then that interaction is not in a structured form, is not really organized, that is when it is not if it is not an organized form, it does not turn into be a social group. It just remains like any other group. Fourth and the last aspect or the characteristic of the social group is that it has an enduring character. This is because social interaction is sustained over a period of time. So it is not something that it is just spontaneous and it goes off in one go. It sustains over a period of time. Why? Because social interaction is something that sustains over a longer period of time when there is this interaction that takes place. Coming to the classification of the social groups, and this is something which is very easy and very, very important for you to understand. Now, the first basis of the classification is into the primary and the secondary groups. Now, it is based on the analysis of the primary groups given by Charles Horton Cooley in his book The Social Organization, published in 1909. Now, what is primary group and what is secondary group is for us to understand. So, by primary group, Cooley meant those characterized by intimate face-to-face association and cooperation. You and your family members, you and your peer groups, you and your play groups, you and your neighborhood, who have this face-to-face interaction and face-to-face association and face-to-face cooperation is your primary group. They are the people you are meeting face to face on almost regular basis and are cooperating with them on almost regular basis is the primary group. Now, they are primary in several senses, but chiefly in that they are fundamental in forming the social nature and ideal of the individual's personality. They are the ones who are the first ones who has the influence of shaping up your personality and hence becomes the primary group. Such groups are family, peer group, play group, neighborhood, etc. Now, Cooley specified 5 basic characteristics of primary group, that is 1. Face-to-face association, face-to-face interaction. The unspecialized character of association, you do not have a very specialized character of association. It is not that you're meeting for the fact of education like you meet your teachers in the school setup, or you're meeting for the fact of earning money like you meet your, like you meet your bosses when you grow up. It is a very unspecified and very unspecialized character of an association. Relative performances that you have, however you see your peer performing, you tend to have that relative performance thing on yourself. You tend to have the effect of that on you. limited size and limited membership. You have them in limited size and you have those connections and interactions in limited membership. Intimacy among the members, you are meeting them on regular basis and hence you have this intimacy among the members. Now according to Cooley, primary groups are very important. They are the nursery of human nature. They are the first hand contact for anyone and everyone. So they are the nursery of human nature. Membership in primary group is essential link between the individual and the society. In the pre-industrial societies, almost all societies takes place in the primary group only. So it says that in the it is something that is the first connect that is there between the individual and the society, and hence plays a very, very important role in the socialization of the child. Talking about the secondary groups. Now socialists define secondary groups as those groups which are not primary. So those groups which are not primary are known as the secondary groups. Thus Ogburn and Nipkow say that groups which provide experience lacking in intimacy can be called as secondary groups. Examples, let's take it, is trade unions, political parties, clubs, professional associations, etc. Like I was talking about. Even your school setups is a secondary group, because it is not something that you're meeting each and every person of your school on regular basis, but still the whole school is providing you a lot of experience. It is giving you a lot of experience without even having that lack of intimacy. Still you are getting that experience. Here in example of trade unions, political parties, clubs, professional associations, all of these are the aspects of these secondary groups. Now secondary groups have following characteristics, which have the formal relationships, which is the impersonal relationships. You have a formal relationships. It is not something that you have in impersonal relationships. Lack of intimacy, yes. Unlimited or large sizes, because it's a huge sphere. You're not really have to be connected to one-on-one altogether. So it can have large sizes and large number of people. Differences between the primary and the secondary group. I'm sure till now the differences between the primary and the secondary group would have been clear, but just looking at what all they have said. Social relationships in a primary group are face-to-face and intimate, but they are formal and usually indirect in our secondary groups. So you have face-to-face and intimate social relationships in the primary groups, whereas you have indirect and secondary and formal relationships in the secondary group. So the members of the primary group share their interests in common, but the members of the secondary group share only limited interests in common. Thus, primary group are said to be person-oriented and secondary groups are said to be goal-oriented. Your education is your goal that you want to achieve. You're learning about your personal oriented in the way you learning about the aspects of caring, or you learning about the acceptance of the society, is something that you are taking in from your primary groups and hence becomes a person oriented goal. In primary group, members have intrinsic value, while in secondary group persons have extrinsic value. It is to do with what kind of values and norms and social ideas that you have in the primary group. Because you are so well knit and closely related that it is more about your personal growth and personal identity. Whereas when you talk about the secondary groups, it is more to do with the goals that you achieve. So your ideas and your concepts of confidence and what all goals you want to achieve in your economical sphere is all what gets in there in the secondary groups. Moving ahead, primary groups are small in size, whereas secondary groups are large in size. Primary groups are relatively stable and permanent. Your family, your friends, your neighbors are relatively stable and permanent, whereas your secondary groups are transitory and temporary. The members of the school that are there will be changing, the members of the political parties will be changing, the ideas will be changing, the concepts will be changing, and hence it becomes a temporary or a transitory role. Now, talking about the second aspect of classification is the in-group and the out-group. Now, W.G. Sumner formulated the concept of this in-group and on-group on the basis of subjective attitude of members. Let us understand what are they trying to say. So, according to in-groups, according to Sumner, you had groups with which individual identifies himself are known as the in-groups. I belong to that group. I identify myself with that group, being family, neighborhood, tribe, sex, college, etc. He identifies himself by the virtue of his awareness of likeness and consciousness of kind. You understand that you share similar kind of consciousness, you share similar kind of likeness, and hence you become a part of that in group. You had this we feeling, you have that belongingness to that particular group. So in group can also be called the we group. Like I said, you have that we feeling. The individuals in society may belong to a number of groups which are in groups. All other groups to which an individual does not belong are his out groups. For example, if you talk about, I belong to a group of being an educator also, very intrinsically, very, being a part of in group. I belong to being a group of being a girl as well. I belong to being a group of an unmarried woman as well. I belong to being a group of professionals as well. So I may belong to different groups which may be a part of all the in groups, and the ones I do not belong to are the out groups for me. So the members of an in-group feel that his personal welfare is bound up with other members of the group. Like my personal welfare is an association with the other members of the group. The in-group has a considerable degree of sympathy, sense of solidarity, loyalty, friendliness and cooperation. We are together in this there, right? So we all together want to achieve, we all together have our aspects of achievement, and that is what makes a part of in-group. For example, India as a nation is our in-group because we identify ourselves with it, possesses a sense of solidarity, sympathy, pride, loyalty, cooperation, etc. For us, other countries are out-groups, and the members of in-groups signify their unity by the word we and their distinctiveness from the others by applying to them as the term they. We are the ones who are Indians, they are the ones who are Americans. So we are in a way distinguishing ourselves, like the in group, not just me, like the whole group of Indians, whole community of Indians, to in group from the out group of them being an American, from them being Americans, Australians, Sri Lankans, whatever. Talking about out groups. Now, out groups consist of those persons, whether formally organized or not, towards whom we feel a sense of indifference, avoidance, disgust, competition, and outright conflict. A group of people we are not really belonging to, we do not really connect to. So out groups can also be called they groups. For example, within the household, within the neighborhood, in a city, a single family may form an in group or an out group. They do not want to be a part of that particular group. To this particular family, all other families are out groups. And to that neighborhood, all other neighborhoods are they or out groups. So basically, if there's one family who does not want to mingle up with the other of the neighborhood, so this family has built in their own in group. For them, these people are the out groups. And for exactly the same way, for these people who have considered themselves to be the in group, this family actually turns out to be an out group. And that is how they have defined it. However, the concept of in-group and out-group are relative. Example, a college is an in-group to all the students of that college, but within the college, when the students identify with their class, the other classes to which they do not belong to are the out-groups. So if you belong to class 7th A, and if for you the other school or the other classes of 7th B and 7th C will be out groups, but together if you belong to, let's say, X school, all of you will be a part of an in group for the member of another school, let's say Y. And hence it is a relative concept, and hence it is a concept which is there in relation to each other. Generally, the attitude of an individual towards outgroup members is one of antipathy. You're not very sympathetic to them. And however, an individual belongs to many groups, the membership of which is overlapping. Like I told you in my example, I am a part of professional group, I am a part of female groups like the girls, I am a part of unmarried sphere, I am a part of someone who likes baking. So all of these is an overlapping sphere and not something which is very smooth and structured. Moving to the next aspect is very important, formal and informal groups. Again, it is based on the structure and the organization, something that we might be able to understand just by the term of it. Now, what are informal groups? Informal groups are generally small groups and relatively not organized. Okay, so this group very closely corresponds to the C.H. Cole's primary group and characteristics by close physical proximity, intimate and face-to-face interaction, small size, personal and direct cooperation, etc. Family is your informal group. Friends, circle, neighborhood, playground people are all your informal groups. Now, informal groups are characterized by relatively frequent and intense interactions and relatively lengthy relationships that acquire a high degree of alliances. So it is basically a group wherein you do have frequent interactions, you do have a concept of, you do actually have the concept of meeting them on regular basis. You do have, frequent interactions, and the intensity of interaction is a longer one. However, when you talk about formal groups or organizations, these are characterized by the impersonality and the ranked positions, large sizes and relatively elaborate complexity, and long durations, and more structured than the small informal groups. So the kind of groups that you have in the formal ones is majorly dependent on the impersonality, are majorly dependent on the ranked positions, large sizes, and relatively elaborate complexities. You do have complexities, you do have long duration of these structured groups as compared to the small informal groups. Now, in modern societies too, we find small groups in families, among circles of friends, in neighborhood dormitories and work settings. However, modern industrialist societies also contain a radically different type of groups not found in simpler society, that is the formal or the complex organizations. Now, wherein you talk about a formal organization, it is a group deliberately constructed to achieve specific objectives through explicitly defined roles and specified rules. So a group which has actually been structured to have or to achieve defined roles and have specified rules is called a major important aspect of the formal organization. This group form is a major departure from the primary and the kinship groups of earlier societies, and hence in comparison to the primary groups, formal organizations normally involve less frequent and intense interactions and shorter relationships that command less alliances or less elegance. So basically, you have shorter relationships, you have less frequent meetings, you have less intense interactions, and hence the emergence of formal organizations is one of the most dramatic and the important of the developments that we have seen. Formal organizations are prominent features of modern societies and in many cases dominant influence in the culture. Now, most people in modern societies associate with one formal organization for education, that is schooling, another for religion, church, temple, business corporation, and any other public matter in terms of the government or the government agencies. And that is what makes a formal group. I hope this concept of the social groups, or the division of the social groups, the characteristics of the social groups, how are these divided, how are these characterized, is clear to all of you, and you all were able to answer the questions that were, and you all will now be able to answer the questions that will be asked from you in the form of assignment questions.